Welcome to Disasters in History. Today we're going to talk about disasters that occurred during December 7th to December 14th, starting with the Church of the Society of Jesus fire. On December 8th, 1863, a fire broke out in the Church of the Society of Jesus in Santiago, Chile. The church was packed full of people celebrating the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, and as such, the entire church was lit with thousands of candles, oil lamps, and decorated with hundreds of feet of strands of garland made of dried flowers and paper. During the service, a fire began near the altar for the church at the feet of the Virgin Mary. Now, there are a number of theories as to what caused the fire. Witnesses that made it out of the building stated that it was caused by an oil lamp that exploded. Others state that it was caused by wind that blew open the front doors of the church and knocked over a candle. But basically, everyone agrees that it started near the altar of the church. An individual up there attempted to stomp it out, but it quickly spread up the altar and onto the roof, where it then spread amongst the garland there. Prior to the service, all side doors had been closed, leaving only the main doors to the church available for the nearly 3,000 people inside the church to escape. In the incipient moments of the fire, several of the priests and the men who had shown up for the church service were able to escape into the sacristy at the front of the building, where the priests began to save items in the church and locked the door of the sacristy behind them. Now, the reason the men and the priests were able to get there is because the men and the women were separated in the church by a metal fence. So, on one side, you had the men who were able to escape towards the front of the church into the sacristy, which didn't burn, and the women and children who were stuck in the main portion of the church on the other side of the fence. In an attempt to scramble for the exit, a crowd crush quickly formed. Now, there are debates as to whether or not the doors to the church opened inward or outward. Most sources say they opened inward, and several hundred women became trapped trying to escape the flames that way. In addition, the church itself did not have pews or seats of any of nature. All of the people inside praying were sitting directly on the floor, and as such, there was significant fashion at the time for women was to wear large hoop skirts, and because of that, many of them, as they attempted to run from the front of the church to the back of the church, became entangled in their skirts and tripped over others that were sitting on the floor and became entangled that way. Very quickly after the fire spread to the roof, it started to explode oil lamps that were hanging from the ceiling, drop the garland down onto those trapped inside, and set several hundred people on fire who became trapped inside. In addition, soon after, the bell tower and the church roof itself collapsed down onto those remaining inside. In total, somewhere between 2,000 to 3,000 people died in the fire, making it one of the deadliest single building fires in history. It would have been approximately 2% of the population of Santiago, Chile at the time. Our next disaster is the Cross Mountain Mine disaster. On December 9th, 1911, an explosion occurred in the Cross Mountain Mine near Bryceville, Tennessee. A portion of the ceiling in the mine collapsed near the entrance and allowed a large amount of methane gas to escape unbeknownst to the miners. The group of miners inside, a group of 89 men, approached with their open flame oil lamp headlamps and ignited the methane cloud, causing the explosion. This explosion trapped the 89 miners inside the mine itself, and 84 of those miners would die trapped inside the mine in various locations, including 14 sets of brothers. The 5 rescued miners managed to seal themselves in an area that still had good air quality, and despite suffering burns, managed to make it out. Now, this was the first rescue attempt made by the U.S. Bureau of Mines when it was first invented, and showed how useful the Bureau of Mines could be, because those 5 men would have likely stayed inside and died had they not made their rescue. This was also the first time a rescue was attempted by using canaries in cages to detect dangerous levels of gas in the mines. Now, several of these men managed to make it, didn't die in the initial explosion. They managed to make it into various safe locations where they boarded themselves in. Unfortunately, due to the way the explosion occurred, many of those locations had significant poor air quality that caused them to die. Several of the men became trapped together and wrote on the walls farewell letters to their family members, including one man whose farewell letter was inscribed on his headstone for all to read in the future. Our next disaster is the Mayfield, Kentucky tornado. On December 10th, 2021, a large tornado touched down just over the Tennessee-Kentucky border at 8:54 p.m. This large tornado began traveling northeast towards the town of Mayfield, Kentucky, where it reached high-end EF4 strength and caused numerous well-built brick structures in town to collapse, including a factory where several dozen people were ordered to stay or risk losing their jobs. So there was an initial tornado warning of that day. Several people stated they wanted to leave work to go home and take shelter there instead of stay at the factory. They were told by their supervisors if they left, they would lose their jobs, so they stayed. The second tornado warning occurred. They took shelter in the factory. It was struck directly by the tornado and collapsed the majority of the factory itself, killing 9 individuals in the factory and injuring several more. In total, as the tornado traveled through Mayfield, Kentucky, it killed 22 people. It would continue traveling through Kentucky, remaining on the ground for almost 3 hours and 165 miles, killing 57 people in total and destroying over 4,000 structures. It was the deadliest tornado in America since the 2011 Joplin tornado. It reached a maximum estimated wind speeds of 190 miles per hour and lofted debris over 30,000 feet into the air. Now, the interesting part about this particular tornado is it is one of the tornadoes that has been called out by individuals that look at tornado damage in the aftermath of the Enderlin tornado receiving EF5 status earlier this year based on the lofting of several train cars. There were several train cars lofted by the Mayfield tornado that seemed to be indicative of it having EF5 strength, but as of right now, they have not gone back to analyze to see if Mayfield was an EF5 or not. Our next disaster is the Interstate 75 fog disaster. On December 11th, 1990, a sudden fog appeared near Calhoun, Tennessee, across Interstate 75 around mile marker 29 to about mile marker 39. The fog suddenly appeared around 9 a.m., and a semi traveling through the area in the southbound lane slowed down due to a lack of vision. A second semi that didn't slow down rear-ended the first semi. Both drivers climbed from their vehicles unharmed, and as soon as they did so, a car hit the second semi, and then a semi hit that car, which caused the car to burst into flames and kill those inside the car. While this was happening, a car in the northbound lane slowed down due to the accidents and a lack of vision and was struck by a second car. These two cars were hit by a third truck, and a chain reaction of collisions, explosions, and subsequent fires followed after that. In total, 99 vehicles were involved in the pileup, with 12 deaths and 42 injuries. The fog was reportedly so thick that one person stood underneath an overpass in the area and could not see the overpass above him. A police officer that responded to the scene could hear the accidents happening, but could not see any of it, including the flames, despite it being less than 40 feet away from him. The cause of the sudden appearance of the fog has been argued but was never conclusively determined. It's essentially argued that a local factory runs some ponds in the area that significantly contributes to the appearance of the fog, and it is incredibly dense fog. In fact, after this particular disaster, this was the 7th major pileup in this particular stretch. There was one in 1974 that had 18 vehicles that killed 3 people. Another one in April of 1974. The first one was in March of 1974. A second one in April of 1974 that had 9 vehicles that injured 9 people. One in June of 1976 that had 4 vehicles, but no casualties. December 16th, 1977 had 14 vehicles and 7 injured. November 5th, 1978 had 62 vehicles and 46 injured people. Then another one in April 15th, 1979 that had 18 vehicles, 3 killed and 14 injured. So it was very well known that this particular stretch of interstate in Tennessee had a very thick fog problem. So after this one, the state of Tennessee implemented an early warning detection for fog that consists of cameras, laser measurements, a whole host of things to basically lower the speed limit in the area. So if it's a certain distance, it lowers it from 70 to 55. If it's lower distance visibility, it lowers it to 35. If it is a certain distance, it will completely close the interstate entirely, so no one can travel through the area until the fog disperses. And now we're going to talk about our disaster of the week. This is the Clapham Junction rail crash. On December 12, 1988, at 8:10 a.m., a passenger train crashed into the rear of another passenger train near Clapham Junction railway station in London, England. A few seconds later, a third train traveling the opposite direction collided with the debris scattered by the collision of the first two trains. Now, in order to understand how these collisions occurred, we need to understand the signaling system that was used in England at the time. Okay, so to understand what happened here, we first have to understand the signaling system that was used by trains on the rails in London, England at the time. So, it looks something like this. These two blue boxes are our trains. Each section divided here is a section of track. Each of these sections is going to have its own signal, which is going to look like this up here. Now, each of these circles means something. So, let's assume that there is a train stopped 5 signals ahead of this train. So we're traveling this direction, okay? So when they come up on this signal right here, this one is going to be green because it is safe to proceed. As they move through, as this train is stopped, they're going to come up to the next signal. Remember, this is what it looks like up here. This right here is what it looks like. It's going to have a double yellow, which is going to indicate to him that there is a caution ahead. As he travels through this one, the next one is going to have a single yellow, which is going to indicate that 2 stops ahead of him, there is a caution there as well. And then on the last signal before this one, it will be red, which tells him to stop. These indicate that he needs to start slowing down. This indicates that he needs to stop before traveling on because there was a train stopped ahead of him. Now, on the day before the disaster, this signaling system needed to be upgraded with new wiring. And in doing so, they sent an individual who had worked for 7 straight days for 13 straight weeks. That is a grand total of 91 straight days that this person had worked. When they did so, they went in, they changed out the old wiring. Instead of cutting out the old piece of wiring and removing it entirely, they removed it from the relay, but kept it connected to the actual fuse itself, and then left it like that. Same length, didn't remove any insulation, none of that. When they left, they came back later and continued working. When they were working at that point, the old wire that they had not removed connected itself to the relay. Now, the way this works is that as this train travels through, it disconnects the circuit, which turns this light red, which indicates the rest of the system. What is supposed to happen is as the train passes by, this light will turn to red so that it indicates trains behind it that there's a train ahead. When this train here, this one back here, came across this area, he watched it turn from green to red in front of him and then back to green. He stopped, called control and said, hey, there's something wrong with this signaling system. They radioed back and said, no, there's nothing wrong with it. There's no problem. And then while he was calling them with the trackside phone, his train was shoved several feet in front of him as it was collided in the back by a different train. Essentially what had happened was when they had gone back to continue working on it, the old wire they hadn't disconnected had re-fallen and landed so that it made connection with the metal for the relay. So when this train stopped on the tracks, it didn't disconnect the circuit because it was being connected by a different circuit. And so no one knew that there was a train parked. The one behind him didn't know there was a train parked ahead because his light was green. Now, he did manage to kind of slow down a little bit and slam on the brakes before slamming into the back of it, but not nearly enough to avoid the catastrophic damage. In the end, 35 individuals died in this disaster, and it injured nearly 500 more. In the aftermath, there were a large number of changes made to railroad working conditions in England, including limiting the amount of hours an employee could work, considering the last guy had worked for literally 91 straight days, which leads to fatigue and issues like this, where you don't take out things that need to be taken out. And with that, we've reached the end of this week's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, like, subscribe, share, comment, all of that. You're adults, you know what to do. Remember to stay safe and check your smoke detector batteries.